Welcome, y'all. Welcome. Okay, so we about to kick off our annual general membership assembly call. I'm Keon. I'll be our MC tonight. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm an anchor member of the SMA with Spirit House. If you're on the computer, type your name, pronouns, organizations, and state in the chat. So, a few logistics for the call. Tonight we will be recording, and everything will be emailed to all those who register for the call. We also need y'all to mute your phones or your computer if you're not talking to reduce the sound interference. And we like folks to tweet and post about the call. Use Southern People's Power when you post. Thank you. So what y'all can expect from the General Membership Assembly calls in 2021. We will begin today's talk call with the orientation for the first 15 minutes. An opportunity to invite all the folks who haven't had the pleasure of joining the SMA to join. For tonight's focus, we'll be wrapping up part 3 of our discussion on racial capitalism. Last month, we heard from Emery Wright, the co-director of Project South, about the history of racial capitalism and the Black radical tradition in the global and the US South to resist racial capitalism. Tonight, we are graced with the presence of April Taylor and David Ferris again from Highlander to explore the values and the strategies for building a different system, a social solidarity economy. We will focus on the seeds of solutions transpiring in our communities and around the world. We will resist racial capitalism and nurture these seeds. We will cultivate a foundation of a more democratic, just, and sustainable system. As a way to orient new and existing members to the SMA, we like to share a collaborative video that names the SMA Principles of Unity. So, pulling up the video.
Could we introduce the interpretation first?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. Hola, muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos a la llamada. Este es Kion que está hablando, está siendo el maestre de ceremonia. Les queremos dejar saber que esta llamada será grabada y será enviada por correo electrónico a todas las personas que se han inscrito a esta llamada. También les pedimos por favor que si no están participando, que se pongan en silenciador para poder quitar el ruido de trasfondo. También al principio o los primeros 15 minutos estaremos hablando de la orientación para unirse a ESMA. Después el enfoque será terminar la parte 3 del capitalismo racial. La última reunión que tuvimos fue de historia y resistencia global hacia el capitalismo racista. Y hoy tenemos la maravillosa presencia de tener a April y David de Highlander que están aquí con nosotros. Y también queremos orientar a nuevos miembros. Vamos a poner un video, pero antes de eso vamos a hablar de la interpretación. Welcome everyone to this call. This is a bilingual space brought to you by the Dismantle Language Justice Cooperative. I am Rocio and I'm here with my co-interpreter Ada. Muy bienvenidos sean todos. Este es un espacio bilingüe traídos para ustedes por la Cooperativa de Justicia de Lenguaje Sensontle. Somos Rocío y Ada. Como sabemos, nuestros movimientos son multilingües y se requiere un compromiso de todos el crear espacios multilingües. As we know, our movements are multilingual and it takes everyone's commitment to create multilingual spaces. ¿Cómo podemos practicar la justicia del lenguaje juntos? So how can we be in language justice practice together? Solo como recordatorio, hay un micrófono y solo podemos interpretar por una persona a la vez. A quick reminder that there's only one mic and we can only interpret for one person at a time. También se les pide que silencien su micrófono cuando no estén participando. Also, please mute your mic whenever you are not participating. También se les pide, por favor, que hablen en voz alta, fuerte y claro para llevar su mensaje. Also, please speak up loud and clear so we can hear your message. También, por favor, les pedimos que hablen despacio a un ritmo más lento o moderado, especialmente si están leyendo, tendemos a leer más rápido. Also, please slow down, speak at a moderate pace, and be extra mindful whenever you're reading. We tend to speed up when we read. También es de mucha ayuda respirar. Respirar después de cada frase, pausar al hacer preguntas o cuando cambia la persona que está participando. It's also very helpful to take a breath after each sentence, pause after asking a question, or when there is a switch in speakers. Después de que hayamos hablado de cómo encender la interpretación, si están teniendo problemas, déjenos saber inmediatamente, escriban un mensaje en el chat, ya sea a Annie o a una de las intérpretes. If after we go through on how to turn on the equipment for interpretation, you're still having issues, please let us know immediately. Write a message in the chat to Annie or one of the interpreters. Entonces, ¿cómo acceder a la interpretación? Puede verse de dos maneras, dependiendo si están por computadora, será como la izquierda, o si están por teléfono inteligente o tableta, se verá más como la derecha. Si están por computadora, la interpretación ya ha sido activada, así que podrán ingresar al ir a la parte inferior de su pantalla. En la barra de menú verán un globo que dice interpretación. Una vez que den clic ahí, tendrán el modo apagado para la gente bilingüe que puede escuchar en ambos inglés y español. Tenemos el modo en inglés para la gente que solo quiere escuchar y participar en inglés, o español para la gente que solo quiere escuchar y participar en español. Una vez que le hagan clic ahí, ya tendrán la interpretación puesta. Si están en teléfono inteligente o tableta, se verá bastante similar, pero tendrán que ir a la parte inferior de la esquina derecha, tendrán los 3 puntos que dicen más y de ahí verán un menú que dice interpretación de idiomas. Una vez que den clic ahí, tendrán las mismas 3 opciones, audio original para la gente bilingüe, inglés o español. Una vez que seleccionen el idioma en que se sienten más cómodos, pondrán finalizado y tendrán la interpretación encendida. So how to access interpretation may look like two ways depending if you're on a computer, it may look like the left-hand side. If you're on a smartphone or tablet, it will look like the right-hand side. If you're on a computer, the interpretation has been enabled, so you can go to the bottom of your screen at the menu bar, you will see a globe that says interpretation. Once you click there, you'll have 3 options. The off button for bilinguals, English or Spanish. English for those who would like to only listen and participate in English, and Spanish for those who would like to only listen and participate in Spanish for this call. Once you click whichever language you would like, you will have the interpretation on. If you're on a smartphone or tablet, it will look similarly, but you have to go to the bottom right-hand corner. You will see the little 3 dots that says more. Once you click there, you'll have language interpretation. Once you click there, you'll have the same 3 options, original audio for bilinguals, English or Spanish. Once you choose a language in which you feel most comfortable in, it will hit done and will have the interpretation enabled. Muchísimas gracias a todos y Highlander por siempre hacer un espacio inclusivo y bilingüe. Thank you so much to everyone and to Highlander for always making an inclusive language and bilingual space. Thank you.
Thank you, interpretation team.
Shouts to the interpretation team. So now we transition into the video of the SMA principles.
Yep.
Women Watch Africa, Clarkston, Georgia. The Southern Movement Assembly is the solution to our region's biggest systemic challenges. We organize and assert bottom people power to build shared power, expand democracy, and protect frontline communities from violence in all its forms. We are a multiracial, multi-issue, multi-generational movement alliances of grassroots organizations across the South that practices democratic governance, coordinates shared actions, and convene people movement assemblies of frontline communities to grow bottom-up power and build infrastructure for long-term liberation. To this end, The SMA developed and approved the principles of unity, and member organizations are required to align with these principles of unity.
Priya Cobham, Atlanta, Georgia, Women Watch Africa. The principles of unity connect the members of the Southern Movement Assembly and reflect many years of organizational partnerships. They represent a synthesis of ideas based in collective practice and historical examples of organizing and struggling for social justice and freedom. The principles name who we are, what we believe, and our purpose for working together to regenerate and advance the Southern freedom movement in the 21st century. Upholding these principles affirms the foundational belief that we are stronger together and we cannot do this alone. To work and be together is a political decision. We're not doing it for either comfort or practicality. These principles will be evaluated and evolved periodically.
Nikki Brown, Whitakers, North Carolina, Spirit House, Inc. Principle number 1 is rooted in history. We believe remembering, learning, and growing from our movement history is critical. We commit to recognize our long-term legacies and the most recent work that led to this moment.
Nia Wilson, Durham, North Carolina, Spirit House. Principle number 2, multiple strategies. We believe in and respect the diversity of tactics and strategies as we are working for liberation. We believe there are many ways to do this work.
Ayana Clemens, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Concerned Citizens for Justice. Principle number 3, community governance. SMA membership and people most affected by injustice should be included in decision-making that affects our lives.
Wendy Schoenfeld, Jackson, Mississippi, alternate routes. Principle number 4, local leadership. We respect and support locally based leadership. Place and space matters, and we recognize the unique histories of the South and local sites.
Principles of unity number 5, organizational self-determination. We recognize and respect the self-determination of each organization and strive to engage in different organizing choices and traditions of our member organizations.
Kim Pevia, Red Springs, North Carolina, alternate routes. Principle number 6, principle dialogue. We value and practice transparency. We strive to distinguish between perception and reality. We engage each other directly when disagreement or conflict is a barrier to collective action and do not air grievances.
Principle number 7, collective accessibility. We recognize and value the skills, contributions, and resources that each community, individual, and organization bring, and will be intentional in how and where we assemble and share information for our collective goals.
Suzanne Farr, National Council of Elders, Little Rock, Arkansas, principle number 8. Resist and build framework. We believe political direction is determined by big picture analysis grounded in struggle to dismantle white supremacy, economic exploitation, patriarchy, and colonialism, while simultaneously building decolonization processes for liberation of all people.
Keon Gozi, Mobile, Alabama, Spirit House. Principle number 9, defend our ground. We will defend the ground that we have gained through struggle, and we will create and practice new forms of participatory governance that include and serve all people.
This set of principles are a combination of many meetings and shared conversation within the Governance Council and the brigade body of the SMA. And the final version, that is the simplified version, was put together on September 16, 2019. And we require that each and every member organization or groups coming into the Southern Movement Assembly would hold these principles of unity dear to their hearts. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you to all those beautiful leaders for sharing the SMA 9 principles of unity. And as they said, these principles evolve from experience and practice working with each other. They were collectively affirmed in 2013 and revised in 2019. We will discuss one of the principles on each call as a way to orient the Southern Movement Assembly. Today, we touch on the resist and build framework. We believe political direction is determined by a big picture analysis grounded in struggle to dismantle white supremacy, economic exploitation, patriarchy, colonialism, while simultaneously building decolonization processes for liberations of all people. And so, how do we determine our political direction? How do we learn about the roots of white supremacy or patriarchy? One of the ways is to share education like these General Membership Assembly calls. The last 3 monthly calls have been spaces to learn about racial capitalism as a system that creates economic exploitation. A question for y'all to drop in the chat is, what ways are you talking about the big picture in your organization? And feel free to take about 5 minutes. You know, we got time.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So the question is, what are the ways that you talk about the big picture in your organization?
Thank you.
Okay, so also, we are excited to launch a new way to learn together. The Hot Damn SMA Freedom and Survival School is a 6-month study group series to learn together and strengthen our organizational skills. The DAM stands for decolonization, abolition, and mutual aid. 3 things that came up throughout the People's First 100 Days campaign. We believe decolonization is critical to building liberation. It's also critical to learn and understand the realities of colonization in this country, and the fierce resistance and survival of indigenous peoples as a key to our movement building. We will talk more about the Freedom Survival School next month and later in the call, but please email info@southtosouth.org if you're interested in being part of our facilitation team. And now I'm going to turn it over to David and April from Highlander.
Thanks, Keon. My name is April. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here with my teammate, David. We are part of the Economics and Governance program on the education team at Highlander. And we want to start with giving a brief summary of workshop 1 and 2 on racial capitalism. And if we can go to the first slide that has the 5 characteristics of capitalism on it. In the first workshop on racial capitalism, we began to collectively explore what the terms economy and capitalism mean to us. And we looked at how the 6 features of racial capitalism really use maximizing profit, wage labor, and privatizing the means of production through oppression, class struggle, and domination and exploitation. We also talked about how racial capitalism is showing up in our community and how the pandemic has impacted our relationship with capitalism. And I want to kick it to David for David to give a little bit of an overview of what was in workshop 2.
Cool. Yeah, we will be sharing the slides afterwards. So I see the question in the chat. We'll make sure to share those slides from workshop 1. I'm also seeing a lot of really amazing responses to the question that Keon raised. What are ways you talk about the big picture in your organization in the chat? So definitely check those out. And yeah, thanks so much, April. My name is David. I use they, them pronouns and work with April on the economics and governance team at Highlander. In workshop 2, Emery Wright from Project South led us in a discussion about the history of social movements and resisting oppression here in this hemisphere. And he kind of grounded it in the fact that the development of social movements here began in relationship to the expansion of colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism, and the specific forms of how Native folks here, Latinx folks, and enslaved African people within this hemisphere set the tone for how the economic, social, and political system would be exported around the globe, right? It set the basis for US colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism, both here, but also globally. And so I really got I came away with a strong understanding that a decolonization process needs to center the experience in the history of Native, Latinx, and formerly enslaved African descendants here in the US to really form a stronger basis for political liberation movements here and also connected to social movements globally. That was an awesome call. So if you weren't on the call or if you haven't listened to the recording yet, check that out. Cool. So yes, like echoing what Steph is putting in the chat. Thanks for your responses so far around big picture thinking and how you're incorporating that into your organizing. I'm going to take us through. So for the purpose of this call, we're going to dive into the values of a solidarity economy, a social solidarity economy, and some examples of what that looks like. We're going to spend as much time as we can digging into the examples in small groups. So if you do have access to a computer or something with a browser so that you can see the slides, it'll be a little bit better of a small group experience for you. But we'll try to make it work for those of you who are on the phone as well. So the first thing we want to do is a guided visualization. So I just want to invite everybody to come off camera, and you can lower your gaze or close your eyes if you like, but just kind of put yourself in a place where you can actually visualize the world that you want to live in. So again, lower your gaze and imagine a vision, your vision, for a just and sustainable world. Imagine that we've reached this place. We've been able to build the just and sustainable world that we've been working for over generations, that our ancestors dreamed of, and that we're organizing and fighting for right now. So breathe in deeply. Imagine that vision, and what do you smell? What are some smells? What do you hear? What are some sounds close by and far away? And notice that you're walking. Feel yourself moving in whatever way you move. What's underneath you? What's around you? What's the scene that you're in? And what do you see as you're moving? Do you see other people? Do you see buildings? Do you see woods and trees? What types of buildings and structures are there? Are there spaces for people to be? What are those like? Who's using them? Who do you see in these spaces that you're moving through? Are they familiar to you? Do you feel connected to them? And you're moving toward a destination. As you arrive at your destination, what are you here to do? What have you come to do? Are you here to visit? To provide some care? Are you here to play? Are you here to work? Take another deep breath. Breathing in that vision for a just and sustainable world, and slowly begin to open your eyes. Come back and notice these other folks who also spent some time envisioning their just and sustainable world. And then based on what you envisioned, what are the values that you want to see reflected in this world? And we're going to paste a link in the chat where we're going to put those values into a word cloud and pull that word cloud up as you put those values in. So you're going to want to go to this URL that's in the chat. Yeah, go ahead and go there, and then let's try to. And if someone could enable me to screen share, I'll bring up the screen share. So I see coming in solidarity, cooperation, shared responsibility, dignity. Yeah, you notice you can upvote some that others dropped in. I see joy and transparency. Here we go. Now I can share my screen. Solidarity and abundance, justice, holistic, shared responsibility, still there. Down a little further, we have creativity, dignity, cooperation. A couple of cooperations, mutuality, life full of love, a world where everyone can live in peace and dignity. Preventative, not reactive, earth honoring, respect. It looks like abundance is rising to the top. Abundance and solidarity. Keep them coming, y'all. Resilient. Healing ourselves by healing the earth. Kind. A life that honors the need to rest. Silliness. Someone upvote silliness for me. Yes, lovely. Rest. Humble. Yeah, humility. Patience. This is great. So keep them coming, and we'll definitely share these out with everybody. It looks like abundance, solidarity, transparency, justice, and silliness are the ones for this particular formation of folks that we've got in this crew. Awesome, y'all. Thanks so much for sharing your vision and your values. So Amy, would you mind sharing the solidarity economy values in the slide deck? Thanks. It'll be 2 more. All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so as a framework, the solidarity economy framework is grounded in 5 core values, and those are solidarity or cooperation, mutualism, reciprocity, symbiosis. The second is equity in all dimensions, right? So like race, class, gender, ability, and resisting these oppressive systems. Democracy in politics, at work, in community, in the economy. Sustainability, so embracing the rights of Mother Earth. And finally, pluralism, which is another way of saying many, many different ways to get there. So I'm just noticing a lot of connections between the values that y'all lifted up and these values from the solidarity economy framework. We have solidarity, we've got justice and equity. We've got democracy, I think was lifted up. We've got multitude of cultures was something that y'all lifted up, and we have pluralism here. Right, lots of different ways. So lots of alignment between the visions of this group and this framework. So next slide. So just want to share a little bit more about where the solidarity economy framework comes from. It comes from an international network for the promotion of social and solidarity economy. It was a 2-year global consultation process. So they went around to groups all around the world who were building alternatives to the current capitalist system, and spent that 2 years developing and synthesizing in a similar process to how the Southern Movement Assembly develops our plans and our assembly process. And they came up with these 5 values. And what solidarity economy is a framework that connects people and practices that are aligned with those 5 values that I mentioned, and that explicitly articulates a post-capitalist world. So where some other frameworks might be agnostic or not so clear, a social solidarity economy is very clear that capitalism as a framework and as a system is not going to get us to the world that we need, to a just and sustainable world, and we need a post-capitalist framework. There are a bunch of global organizations and institutions that are working to drive this work, and I just shared a couple here on the slide. I'm going to kick it to April to share a little bit more about this framework.
Thanks, David. And if I can get the next slide here. So what does this actually look like? There we go. And so if we want to start to look at how do these values translate into examples that show up in our lives, then we can look at what transformative justice is instead of the police state, or what community control or the commons looks like versus a monopoly having control over, say, the means of production, and what it means to be a worker owner versus having a boss, what community land trusts look like versus having landlords, what it means to be part of a credit union versus a bank, what it means to have participatory democracy as a system of governance versus representative democracy, and then also what tenant unions look like versus landlords. And this slide is also an example of pluralism, a multitude of approaches. And if I can get the next slide there. And again, it just underscores the fact that solidarity economy is a framework that provides an umbrella for a number of approaches, and that the end goal is a post-capitalist world, but that it is inclusive of the number of different ways that we all will get there. And if I can get the next slide, the solidarity economy also encompasses all economic sectors. And so if we look at production / reproduction, there are worker co-ops, do-it-yourself, care work, community gardens, skill shares, and community production that fall under that sector. There's also distribution and exchange. So that would include things like social currencies, time banks, fair trade, toy and tool shares. There's also the sector of consumption. So that's where things like community land trust, resident-owned communities, and food co-ops would fall. There's also the sector of finance, where things like credit unions, peer lending, community loan funds, and direct public offerings would fall. And then there's, of course, the governance sector, where things like participatory budgeting, community governance, and things like schools and other policies would fall. And if I can get the next slide here. We've talked a little bit about this in terms of the SMA principles, and then also in terms of the framework, but this is part of resist and build, in the sense that we resist the things about the capitalist structure that we don't want and interrupt the harm, and also resist it in terms of policy, and then also build the alternatives that we want, and the relationships that we have are the common thread that run through all of those things. And if we want to take a look at the resist and build framework on a more detailed level when it comes to the Southern Movement Assembly structure, then we have that on this next slide here. And we are moving through these slides a little quickly, but we will share this slide deck out for folks who may not be familiar with this slide, if you want to read through it in a little bit more detail. But the way that the resist and build framework shows up here in relation to the Southern Movement Assembly structure is that we want to gather our people, build sanctuary spaces, and tear down walls. And so if I can get the next slide there. And so why solidarity economy? It is a world in which many worlds fit. Again, it's pluralist, it's non-dogmatic, humble, which is a value that came up when we did the word cloud. It's also grounded in lived experience, and therefore is constantly evolving to meet the needs of the people. It's a big tent, a big umbrella, so it includes or overlaps with many other approaches. It's clearly defined, and it's post-capitalist with intersecting values, and it's a growing global movement grounded in concrete practice. And so one of the ways we're going to go ahead and explore what that concrete practice looks like is to look at some very specific examples of solidarity economy. And we're going to go into breakout groups to do that. So we'll have 8 different groups that should be groups of about no more than 5 to 6. And if I can actually get the next slide here, we're going to show you all an example of how this will work. We've got some beautiful solutions. And we're going to use some, yeah, there we go. We've got some beautiful solutions, and each group, when you go into your breakout group, if you look at the top left, you'll be able to see which group you're assigned to. And each group will have slides that are linked. We'll drop that link in the chat that will take you to this slide. And if you hover over the link that appears next to the color that you're assigned, for this example, we're going to do group H, which is assign the lime green slides. And if you go to the next slide here, it'll show you the example of what happens if you were to hover over the example of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And so we're going to ask that you consider in your breakout group, discuss what is a mind-blowing example, why and what makes it possible. And while you're in the breakout, we ask that you pick someone in your group to type this up and be prepared to share it in the chat when you come back. Do we have any questions about how this is going to work? We are going to copy and paste the instructions and the link in the chat for folks. And we'll have about 25 minutes in the small groups before we come back to share. All right, if we don't have any questions, then we'll get folks to their breakouts. And again, we just want to take a look at these beautiful solutions and consider what makes them possible and what's mind-blowing about them and why, and choose a person to share in the chat when we come back.
So I think while Annie is setting up the breakout rooms, we will, if you want to be in a bilingual room, you can stay in the main room. Annie, should we like put a star in the chat if we want to stay in the main room?
Yep, please put a star in the chat if you want to stay in the main room. All right, so I have 2 people so far who want to stay here.
So you'll know what group you're in. It'll appear at the top left of the group that you're assigned to. For the person that was asking in the chat. And you'll be automatically sent to that breakout.
We see you, Chuck. Thanks for taking care of the little one. Understand. Do what you can if you want to join. We're happy to have you join.
I'm sorry.
All right. Sorry.
I haven't been put into a group yet, I think.
No, nobody has. I was about to open the rooms right now. Okay. I think I actually didn't put Ada in the group. Okay. Everybody, you should see the options on your screens to join a breakout room. if you haven't already. Okay. So folks should be joining back. And we're back. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back, everybody. So a quick reminder to click interpretation at the bottom of your screen, the globe, or if you're on a phone to go to the 3 dots more and then click language interpretation and choose the language that you would like to listen to and speak in. All right, just giving y'all a second to do that. So now we're coming back. We're back from our small groups. Hopefully you had really interesting, engaging, lively, fun discussions about these beautiful solutions. And we're really excited to hear which ones you found mind-blowing. So do folks want to share? Feel free to just come off mute or drop in the chat. Which ones did you, what did you find mind-blowing about the examples that your group got? And if you want to share one example, that would be great. We'd love to hear it.
All right, Group E. You ready?
Yeah, go ahead, Chuck.
All right. So we had a decent discussion around how all of our beautiful solutions truly kind of would work together. But we kind of settled on the community land trust. And what makes the community land trust, and I'm trying to get that into the chat now. What makes the community land trust so mind-blowing is that they're taking advantage of our current economic system to reclaim property and protect communities against the negative effects of housing, insecurity, gentrification, and capitalism.
Thanks so much, Group E. Thanks, Chuck. What other solutions stood out to folks?
This is BA from Group A. I think so. One of the solutions or one of the areas that we felt was really mind-blowing was time banking. A very simple solution, yet something that more communities could really think about. And it's something that everybody in a community could participate in. And it really fosters a socialization around more caring and nurturing, and it values some of the reproductive labor that's free out there. It shows that everybody has a skill that they can share in the community. Anyone from my group that wants to add, please do.
Yeah, thanks so much. If you or someone in your group wants to say just briefly, what is a time bank for folks who weren't in the group or didn't read the card?
Okay, I apologize for the delay. I was touching stuff and didn't know what I was doing. But you know, a time bank is where you take your skill and you use your skill or service as a trade. So if one person can cook and another one can say build a chicken coop, then that's what you would do. So one person would build the chicken coop and then the other person would fix them a plate. But if you come across someone where you need a service, then and you didn't have a skill, then you can do something simple like maybe drive them to the next town over, and then that will put time in the time bank that you served, and that you can build that time up to where if there's something you need in the future, or if you want to gift that time to somebody, then they can utilize it, or you can utilize it later in the future. So that's what a time bank is. It's like a savings of services rendered.
Thanks so much, Ramona. That was a brilliant explanation. Appreciate that. Other groups, what mind-blowing solutions do you want to lift up?
I was in group F, and I'm gonna put it in the chat real quick. Hold on. We had resident-owned public housing in DC. The residents of a former public housing project in DC bought their 84-unit building and turned it into like an affordable housing cooperative for the residents there. And it took them about 7 years, and like it kept them like stable and not having to worry about being pushed out by like gentrification or demolition and stuff like that. So I thought that was like the coolest thing ever.
Thanks, Asia and Group F. Other groups want to share? I'd love to lift up one more out loud and then hear from other folks in the chat. Looks like we have something from Norma. Feel free to come off mute, Norma. We'd love to hear. All right, I see. We're feeling a little shy. Okay. Well, we are very grateful for you diving into these solutions and talking about them and taking the time to dig in. Hopefully they were inspiring and mind-blowing, and you got some ideas for what you can do in your community. And we want to take the next couple minutes to just reflect on what we've done together today, talking about our values and our visualization, our vision of the world, talking about what solidarity economy is, this kind of big tent framework, right, that offers lots of different ways that we can be building alternatives to capitalism, to racial capitalism. And then we dug into these beautiful solutions. So I want to invite you now to think about what is a next step that you could take. It looks like Group B shared theirs in the chat. Thanks, Group B. Seizing factories, yes. So the recuperated factories movement, where when the factory closed down, the workers just took it over and they were like, now this is ours. That's an awesome example. Thanks for sharing that. So take a minute now to just think about what's a next step you want to take. Do you want to learn more about one of these things that you read? Do you want to dig back into the slides and look at all the other slides that your group didn't have? Do you want to follow up with somebody on this call that you met tonight? Do you want to do some more reading? You know, what's a next step that you can take coming out of this call? Do you want to tell a neighbor or a friend, or do you want to do some scavenger hunting in your own community for these kinds of solidarity economy solutions? do some local mapping maybe of what's happening near you. Just trying to offer some ideas for what you could do next. So share your next step in the chat and let's get inspired by each other's next step. I love Donna's answer. I want to do all the things. Yes. Lovely. And Norma says, I'm learning about being a community organizer. I'm here to learn. That's awesome. It's a great next step too. You just keep learning. Sarah says, learn from resources in my own community and those shared by Ramona, and to read all the slides. Awesome. BA, want to use some time banking as part of my startup cooperative crowd work. All right. I want to learn more about your startup cooperative. That sounds fun. Austin, reading through the slides and sharing out the blueprint with my people. And Jasmine, finding other community members willing to take back land and utilize our shared economic power. Credit scores are racist. Yes, thanks, Jasmine. BA, also want to learn about participatory budgeting. Great. Yep. Tiffany says, investigating community land trusts and resident-owned housing, and seeing about making a proposal to community members. Ayana, I'm looking forward to reading the book Collective Courage. That's by Jessica Gordon-Nimpert that was shared in our group, and sharing this recording with local folks. Continue, and David says, continue being part of a group in my local community working on creating a racial healing space and addressing issues of racial justice. Awesome, thanks, David. Asia, feeling super inspired. I love hearing about the things like this because I know the impossible is possible and that I'm working in the right direction to bring about change in my city. I'm glad. Thanks for sharing that with us, Asia. And with that, hope you all, we will definitely share out these resources and hope they're interesting and useful to you. In our group, folks had really amazing feedback about what they would want to see built onto these resources. Like we talked about, what was the government role in each of these? And that was like an interesting question that came up. Another was like, what did these folks go through to get to this solution? You know, if we could tell some of those stories. So would love more feedback as you dig into these. I'm gonna kick it to Keon to close us out. Thanks so much, April, the co-facilitator and comrade. I appreciate you a lot. And yeah, Keon, close us out. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so thank you to our speakers, David and April. This was dope. I really enjoyed the slides. I'm sure everybody else did. So before we close out, we're gonna talk about what's next. And the next thing that we got up is the August 25th General Membership Assembly call next month. And what we're gonna be discussing on that call is the launch of the Hot Damn SMA Freedom and Survival School. Over the next few weeks, we will share an invitation to be part of the Hot Damn SMA Freedom and Survival School, a 6-month study group series to learn and strengthen our organizing skills. The DAM stands for decolonization, abolition, and mutual aid, the 3 things that came up throughout the People's First 100 Days campaign. Okay, so keep an eye out for that. In order to build what we want, we have to know where we come from and the root causes of what we're dealing with now. When we share a political vision, we become a stronger movement to fight for our freedom and survival in this time of crisis. We just want to get to know each other better and share ideas for how to do our organizing better. So the action steps for tonight is to stay in touch with us and follow on social media with the hashtag Southern People's Power. And the second part is to sign up as a member of the SMA at southtosouth.org/become a member. And the last part is to register for the August monthly call. So before we close out, I want y'all to take a quick breath with me. So on the count of 3, I want y'all to breathe. So 1, 2, 3, breathe. One more time. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Thank y'all. I appreciate y'all giving us y'all time, and thank you to the interpreters. Y'all done a wonderful job. And if there's nothing else, all hearts and minds clear. Y'all can all come off mute and tell each other y'all love each other, and we can piece up out this thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love y'all.
Thank you.
Stay safe and healthy.
David, you rock.